morning, everybody. I'm Jeff Brown, and that's Mark Brown, and we're twins, even though we don't look like it. No, not really. We're not related at all. But we welcome you here this morning to MinneBar in one of the first sessions of the day, and we appreciate you being here. A little bit about what we want to do today. Before we start, there's a technology that's been developed by a local company here in the Twin Cities. Some people that work down at Cocoa. I happen to be at Cocoa myself, and so we're using their technology today. If you have questions, you can scan that QR code, and it'll take you to a web browser, a website, and at that site, if you get there, it'll look like that. And basically, it gives you an option to use your phone to ask me questions or to ask Mark questions. You'll see in there, you can just use the phone, type in any question that you may have for us, and we'll be able to get it up here so we can know a little bit ahead of time what kind of questions people are asking and feeling about. So it's a great technology because it's all web-based and it's easy to use. And the thing I like about it as a presenter is that if I see somebody using their phone, I'm assuming they're asking me a question and not bored with the presentation. So it works really well that way. Pardon me? Yeah, you can still use your hand. I mean, if you don't have a smartphone and you're still back in those dark ages, you can use your hand. Or we'll also have time for questions at the end. Kind of the agenda today is we're going to talk a little bit about, I had the experience of working at Apple from 1981 to 85, and had a good opportunity to interact with Steve Jobs on many occasions. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we did at Apple back in those days, and what our why was, and why we were in business, and how that affected what Apple is today. And then we're going to get into a case study of a local company here in the Twin Cities that I've worked with that has created their why and what that's meant to them in helping create their culture and their brand. So if you think about what's going on in the world today, quite a bit different than when I worked at Apple back in the early 80s. In the early 80s, we didn't even have software. Think about that. Not that long ago, but we didn't have software. I originally got hired at Apple to go in to help them create licensing programs so we could monetize software and monetize other things we were doing there. And then ended up getting involved with a part of the company that we call the HAL team. But today, the world has become so transparent that there's all this noise out there that you can't stand out just by creating technology alone. At Apple, we stood out because we were doing something a little bit different. But today, there's so many people trying to do the same thing, and the noise that's going on out there doesn't allow you to accomplish what you need to unless you differentiate yourself. And science has proven that emotion trumps logic. So an integral part of what you need to do to differentiate yourself and create a culture and a brand strategy to make sure that your technology or your new product or your company moves in the direction that you want it to, is to make sure that your messaging interconnects and creates that emotional link with the people that you're trying to reach. And that was what we were extremely capable of doing under Steve Jobs. I took this out of the latest Harvard Business Review. Just came out. So this is the latest issue. A key part of the story was that the most significant ingredient that most startup companies or companies that are rebranding or creating new products miss is empathy or purpose. And it's that empathy and purpose that allows that connection that I'm talking about to happen. Now, a lot of entrepreneurial people have empathy, but what they do is they have empathy for maybe not the right reason when it comes to culture, strategy, and brand. The empathy is that they want to get rich. So the empathy is for themselves, right? So an integral part of what's happening in today's market is that there's a lot of products and technology that are coming into the market solely for that reason, to make money. Now, I mentioned earlier that I work at Cocoa. One of the things that I think is very interesting now, being here in the Twin Cities for almost 14 years, is that we have a lot of great startups here. We have a lot of great thinkers here. We have a lot of great new, innovative technology being developed here, and yet we're kind of overlooked. And I continue to have clients out in Silicon Valley, so the reason that I'm talking about this is that when I go out to Silicon Valley today, it seems like all the technologists or all the new innovations and everything that people are trying to do is strictly to make money. It's how fast can I get something to the marketplace, how much money can I get from investors, and how fast can I make money for myself. When I look at the technology here in the Twin Cities, I see that the people that are the entrepreneurial spirited people here in the Twin Cities have kind of moved beyond that. Sure, we all want to make money because I think the purpose of any business obviously is to create an opportunity for ourselves. But I think the money, it becomes the measurement of success and not necessarily the only reason that you're going to market. And I bring that up because when I was at Apple, we wanted to do things differently, and whoop, we missed it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start with this. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's great to see it. For those that have seen it, it's nice to see it again.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of a contradictory thoughts. Our unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Exactly. How many of you have seen that before? Just raise your hand. I mean, the intent of that commercial when it was launched was obviously to create a dramatic impression, but it was also to say that we didn't want to be like everybody else. We wanted to change the status quo. We wanted to think differently. We wanted to set trends and not follow trends. And that was the intent of what that was all about. Kind of a funny story, and hope nobody thinks this is sexist, but one of the reasons that this particular model was selected for this commercial is that Steve Jobs happened to like the way her body parts moved when she was running down the aisle to throw the sledgehammer. So it was, but that was the launch of the Mac, and that was the start of really the start of the quick growth at Apple. But the thing that was important about that was that Jobs really wanted to do everything based on changing the status quo, making people think differently, and creating purpose, creating a reason for something. As part of the HAL team, which after I got done with the licensing of the software, we became part of the HAL team. And the HAL team was looking at innovation and the adoption of innovation. So we wanted to start planning early in the 80s where we wanted to be by the year 2000, thus the name HAL team for the Computer in 2001 Space Odyssey. And the thing that's interesting about what we were looking at is there's always been this adoption life cycle curve where in the early stage of new technologies, you got the innovators that grab onto the technology, they adopt to it, they move it to the early adopters. So these are the people that are, a lot of you in this room are the kinds of people that we were looking for in those days, at how fast we could get a message to you. because you were our advocators. You were the people that were going to bring it here to the early majority. And that's where the big movement came. So this was kind of the cycle that we were working in then, and why we started looking at the year 2000, because before the year 2000, we went back to the year 1900 and said, okay, what innovation things happened at Apple, or happened in this country, that we could follow in the example of to understand the timelines of these adoption curves. And the things that we studied were things like electricity, radio, television, assembly line, I mean, you name it. There was tons and tons of innovation going on from 1900 to 1980. The thing that we found common was the adoption line between this point right here and this point right here was about 16 years in just about everything that we studied. Because it was a 4-year period of time when the innovators and early adopters started using that new innovation. They were the ones that moved it into the early majority that followed. And then the late majority was the ones that came later. Now, you could spend a whole day talking about this adoption life cycle, but we don't have that much time today. But what I'm finding today is the adoption life cycle, even though it's collapsed in time, it's not 16 years anymore, it's probably come down to 4 to 8 years. It's still not as fast as most people think, because you're still going through that process of these early innovators grabbing onto the technology and educating the early adopters, which then push it into the early majority. The thing I'm finding about technology is there's become a gap in there, that these people are not knowledgeable enough about what's going on because the technology is moving so fast. So there's this little gap in here. So now when you start looking at how you're going to build your brand and the culture for your organization, you really have to be more purposeful. And you have to be even more identifying the differentiator of what you're doing and what other people are doing, and not just be a me too. So I want to go through this pretty quickly, because the case study I think is going to be important to see how a company here in the Twin Cities has taken this concept and applied it and made it work. Steve Jobs did not listen to experts. His theory was that experts were clueless, and all they wanted you to do was the sameness. So he always wanted to be differentiating what we were doing and how we messaged it. The other thing that I learned from Steve Jobs was that you can ask customers how to evolve, but you can't ask customers how to build a better product that's going to effectively work for them. Customers are back there in that early majority. They don't know how to innovate, so you have to be the innovators, and you have to set the tone and the differentiator of what that product is going to have value for them for. The other thing that Jobs always talked about is design counts. We know that he was a fanatic on great design. The interesting story is that a lot of people think that Jobs was a tyrant. The only time you became, that you had the wrath of Jobs, as we used to call it, is if you didn't adhere to the fact that we were going to change the status quo and we were going to make people think differently, or you didn't adhere to the fact that we were going to have purpose in what we were doing and started going back to sameness. That's when you got the wrath of Jobs. When you didn't, and so in the design side of the company, when you went back to sameness, you got the wrath of Jobs. So he really believed that that was very important, and that the user experience is more important than the initial functionality. It's the user that's going to adopt to this thing quicker, and we can create the functionality on the back end once they start using it. The other thing he always taught us is that it isn't about 10% better, it's about 10 times better. And I think that holds true today. There's so many people out in the world trying to develop the next best thing that you got to think about this as well as the differentiator and what you bring value to the company. Work or doesn't work is all that matters. It's business, not religion. In other words, innovate, get it into the market, get it tested, get the early adopters, they'll put up a little bit of flaws here and there, get them using it so that they can be your evangelists. People need more than just a new product. They need to know the new product adds value to their way of living. Again, the purpose statement, how is this going to create value for them? It's those kinds of messages that led jobs being on time, straight and rich. I talked about earlier that we never talked about money. When I came back from doing the innovation plans of where we wanted to be in the year 2000, we never talked about how much money it was going to make. We always talked about what the purpose was going to be. So things like the iPhone, the iPad, were actually, you would call them mini-Macs in those days. We actually envisioned those in 1983 with the intent that they would be into the market by the year 1900, but we never talked about money. But the money did follow. It proved that his philosophies were correct. So if you look at the iPhone, talked about the fact that we envisioned that early. The reason that we wanted to make things differently, when we envisioned the iPhone, we didn't think about it as a phone. We didn't think that, we thought about it as an appliance, a way for communication, a way that there would be basically applications on there that would allow us to have a better living experience. So, to that point, Steve Jobs. I'm very happy to have met you and know you, and his challenge to change the status quo and believing thinking differently, I think he very much accomplished it. And so I feel very privileged today that that mindset, that culture, that way of doing things is still embedded in myself after being there for only 4 years back in the early 80s. Everything I've done since is still of that same mindset, whether it's been the companies I've started or now as a coach to other companies. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, talk about what they've done with purpose and their why.
Steve Jobs, real easy act to follow. So happy Saturday morning, everybody. And Jeff, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share more about our story and the team at Accelerated Innovations. About a year and a half ago, I was out to start up a new business, an information services business focused on energy efficiency, and was lucky enough to have a conversation with the founder of Accelerated Innovations, Josh Headley, who's up here in the front row. And he said, I believe in what you're doing. We can help you. This is, I needed some software developers to come on and help me build an application. And several months later, we found ourselves saying, this partnership is really working out. It's a real win-win, and I'm lucky enough to continue moving that business quad ROI forward as part of the Accelerated Innovations family. And we were, one of the first things Josh and I started talking about is we really want to codify what we're about, our mission, our values. And we're lucky enough to hook up with Jeff, and back in December had a workshop, a session for us to try to get some of that language out, to try to talk about what it is we do. Why do we get up in the morning every day and try to work at this? And we came up with a why statement. I want to share that with you, and I want to unpack it a little bit, walk you through how we're trying to apply that in how we communicate internally, how we communicate externally. And hopefully that has some applications to what you're out to do, what you're passionate about. This is what we came up with. We build bridges between systems and love. And I know what you're thinking. Love? Yes, love. It is the greatest thing in the world. It is this amazing force that is naturally uncorruptible, disinfectant. It is what we believe to be what happens when your greatest self-interest is the interest of others. And for me personally, my world begins and ends with some very special people. And I think that's probably the case for all of us. We're all working to make our families stronger. The customers we're out to serve, they're all, at the end of the day, working to make their families stronger, make their communities stronger. And I think if we can remember that as we go about trying to move forward in developing and delivering products and solutions, I think we have a better chance at accomplishing something, making a difference, and ultimately being successful. So coming back to the workshop and that process, getting into this, this word cloud up here is taking a couple hundred of the sticky notes and pads that were up on the walls during that session and putting that all together. You can see community is this big concept in there. I think that's a word that gets used a lot because it wrestles with this kind of intersection of all of the activities and systems that we engage in, and as it relates to kind of our overlapping shared and self-interest. And another word that is hard to see up there, but became obviously a part of our why statement, is love. And this particular sticky note is actually from, it was the first person to get up and talk about this, but it's an angel investor that helped Josh get this business going. He's literally put millions of his own dollars into what we're doing. And this is, when he was asked to, put down a few words about what this company's all about, this is what he wrote. He wrote, first of all, Josh, that he's investing in a person. And that, he's excited about this because we're doing something that has purpose. It's about a group of people who share this vision for doing something. And the bottom line here, for him, even our angel investor, is love. We build bridges between systems and love. We connect what is to what is important. We take all the stuff out there and translate into what really matters to people. And by that, I mean all the processes, technology, software, hardware, inputs, outputs. It's really only useful if we can do something to help strengthen our communities, to make our families stronger, to do something to maintain a sustainable environment. So we build bridges between systems and love. MinneBar is a platform. Yeah?
Is that a public mission statement? Is that like, or is that
it's a great question because, yeah, I mean, we're still, to be honest, we came out of that session, it wasn't our entire team that was part of that. We brought this back to the team, and we're wrestling with that. I don't think it's something that gets set in stone, but we have to believe it. If we don't believe it, our customers, our partners, our employees will not believe it. So yeah, that's a really good part of this process is how do we internally, ensure that we're feeling this is how we consistently want to communicate. I mean, I think that's part of where we go with it is we make sure that's a part of everything we do whenever we communicate. Every demo of the MinneBar platform we give, we want that, to be communicated because as Jeff mentioned, if emotion trumps logic and we need to get to trust as quickly as possible for someone to even care about what we're doing, we need to be able to communicate what we believe in. And so with MinneBar, MinneBar is a bridge. It translates from this utility smart metering infrastructure to actually give families and businesses some tools to manage their energy use. And some of how we actually apply this why statement, this is the platform, just had to show off our product. The idea here is to start with why, but you have to move out from there and you have to address how do you actually build bridges between systems and love. And that's what we're going through is a process to try to articulate that. And so how do we do this? These are some things, again, these are just thoughts that we're outlining and wrestling with, but I think if you're going to build bridges between systems and love, you got to really understand the systems you're integrating with. You got to build great bridges. You have to know something about the love, meaning how are you actually making families and communities stronger? And at the end of the day, I think it's all about people. And just to quickly kind of touch on each of these, so this system mastery, that to me has to do with being subject matter experts. It has to do with kind of understanding all aspects of the technology that we're integrating with. It has to do with being a part of all the industry exchanges and being seen as thought leaders, actually contributing to advancing what can be accomplished within these systems. If we're going to build great bridges, and we've had some fun with this analogy. If you think about what are bridges all about, they're hopefully easy to access, and so we think if we can differentiate ourselves by our speed to integrate and the reliability of our platform, if we can actually provide a vital connection to get the user somewhere meaningful, to give them new insights, to actually help them do something of value, we need to focus on that. And enduring landmarks, it should be something we want to take a picture of. We have a lot of pride in, I think, our development team in terms of the craft and the software architecture. Josh and Jeff up here would go on for a long time about why we're excited about that. So remarkable architecture is a part of how we accomplish this. And we need to know what we're talking about when we say love. And that has to have real meaning in terms of doing something useful and valuable for our customers. So we need to think about how does our platform impact families and communities, and think about what are the shared interests of the stakeholders involved. In this case, the utilities and their end-use customers. And finally, work with great people. That has to do with sharing a common set of values, this sense of purpose, has to do with helping those employees maximize their strengths and do what they do best every day. And part of this process has also been articulating those values. As Jeff was talking about this trust, the language we have under this trust value is that our integrity compels us to always deliver more value than we capture, that our financial success is not our purpose, but rather the result of achieving our purpose and doing something for the people we serve. So I hope all of you are out there pursuing your purpose. Thank you for giving me a chance to share more about where our organization is at in applying these concepts and living out our purpose. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
One of the things about doing MinneBar that I found from last year is sometimes I can get speaking too long and not giving my co-speaker time to, or co-presenter time to speak. So I kind of went through that first session very quickly, and we actually have a little bit of time. So I want to open it up even right now for any questions about what's going on at kind of what Mike brought up about, is that the mission statement, or is that an internal statement? Is that part of how you're going to build your culture when they say they're building bridges between systems and love? I can tell you this, that at Apple, when we wanted to talk about changing status quo and making people think differently, it was the culture. Everything we did had to address that. And I know they're doing the same thing at Mark's company. Yeah, Brian.
So, I mean, my question is also more around like marketing language, right?
Okay.
Like, how do you take that, which is kind of esoteric and related to your product and a customer on a website, on a brochure, on a business card, or is that what you use on a business card?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're moving to where we want to ensure there's consistency in our communication, in our marketing materials, that gets to this point that people can believe what we believe and see that there's a trust that we can establish just on the fact that purpose is transparent, that they can identify with that. So it's our goal. I don't think right now we're there and we're working to do that. This is, we're just a couple months into this process, but it's absolutely, I think, essential for us to make sure that is clearly communicated. And I think the companies, I'm sure Jeff's worked with, that have done this and done it well, it's pretty obvious right away what,
There's several that, I don't have examples up here, but a number of the other companies that I've worked with, they've come up, there's a company here in town called B-Swing, and their why statement, or their purpose statement, is to build things that matter to make your tomorrow better. And that is all over their communications. That's the headline of their website, that's the edict for which they work, that's even the edict by which they take clients. They actually, in their particular case, we started working with them about close to 2 years ago. At that time in their life cycle, they had about 40% of their business with clients that they didn't want to work with, because they had been around for 10 years and never had a sales team. Everything was by referral. But they decided where they wanted to go and the kinds of things they wanted to do from the time we went through that, and they found out what their why was and the purpose and how they wanted to articulate that. Not only aren't they not working with those 40% more, which was kind of an interesting project on its own, because we had to take a look at, okay, here's your core business. We can't totally turn off that 40% because we still need to have the revenues in order to achieve the purpose, right? So we had a very strategic plan on how we were going to start doing less and less work with those kinds of companies we didn't want to work with, or B-Swing did. And to the point now, they're only working with the kind of companies that believe in their purpose and that believe in their mantra, and they got the hockey stick going because they found like-minded people that believe in what they're doing. So to that point, that's become an integral part of the communication. Interesting, at Apple, when we had our why statement of changing status quo and thinking differently, our board of directors thought we were crazy. You think about it, early 80s, The boards in that time didn't know what technology was. Technology was IBM with its huge big mainframes and other such things, but it wasn't the way we know technology today. So our board said, you guys are crazy. So we didn't use it as much early on. But when you think about what happened when Steve Jobs came back to Apple in 1996, what was the first thing that happened? It became everything to do with their advertising. So that early statement of thinking differently finally got to be acceptable to the board, because they brought him back and he said, okay, now I'm going to do it the way I want to do it, and not just listen to you. In fact, that commercial that you saw in 1984, the board absolutely told Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak they could not run that commercial. They had bought 3 slots in the Super Bowl that year to run that commercial, and so the board refused to allow them to spend the money on that commercial. So Wozniak and Jobs paid for 1 slot themselves, and the other 2 slots got resold. That's why it only appeared once. But eventually the board got it, paid the money back. But I mean, that's how dedicated they were to what their mission was and what they wanted to do. So I like to, I mean, kind of in conclusion here, I believe that everybody has to differentiate yourself and what you're doing as an organization, and that's going to be that differentiator that's going to help drive the culture and the mindset of the company and the communications that you're going to have with potential clients. So start with why. Use your why to guide culture and brand strategy. Your why will become the business mindset. It'll become how you do business. It'll become the way you attract new people. It'll become the way you achieve your success and your goals. And remember, questions. Yeah.
So I'm fixated on the comment you made at the very beginning about the difference between the professionals here in the Twin Cities versus on the West Coast.
Yeah, I forgot to finish that point. Sorry about that. What I wanted to conclude that with, and the whiter I get, sometimes my memory gets foggy. But what I was trying to point out is that I think that the people in the Twin Cities, the entrepreneurial crowd in the Twin Cities, should give themselves a pat on the back. We as a community are starting to get and see that the rest of the country is starting to recognize us as creating things here that have much more meaning in a lot of cases than what's being created in Silicon Valley. So when I go out there and I'm talking to investors and I'm talking to other companies that I'm involved in consulting out there, I try to bring the culture of the Twin Cities to Silicon Valley rather than the other way around, to bring Silicon Valley to the Twin Cities. So again, the point is that I think that there's the thought process here, and what we are doing here has much longer sustainability in developing businesses. Now, if your mindset is you just want to start something quick and make a big bunch of money and go live on an island someplace, that's great too. But generally speaking, the investment community in this market and some of the other people that are now looking for the next thing to invest in, much like Mark alluded to with their angel investor, if they didn't have purpose, you probably wouldn't have invested. Or part of they wanted to make sure that gelled. So something to think about. Now, yeah.
I probably one more challenging question, but and you sort of say, a lot of, you're trying to develop your why message. I guess my challenge to you is connect that with what you're doing right now. I know you don't want to make it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I want to know why we are going to get involved with, what you're doing as a product.
Sure. So coming back to MinneBar and that being a bridge, we see that as a bridge between a system, which is all this smart grid infrastructure that utilities have, to automate our transmission distribution infrastructure, and we're bridging between families and businesses that care about their energy. Why would a family care about their energy use? Well, one, it's a pocketbook issue. If they can save money on their energy bill, that's more money to put food on the table or send their kids to college, and that's about love. It's or it's a global environmental issue where you're concerned about our air, our water, our natural resources, and that also too I think is about love. So I think if we can make sure we fully translate between how do utilities do something useful with the smart grid infrastructure to empower their customers to accomplish what they want to accomplish, that ultimately ends up in that love. So that's what we think about when we think about MyMeter as a bridge between systems and love, and it takes all those things I talked about in the how to do that. Is that helping?
How is it sort of like, how is it they're developing what people are going to do differently in the future? So it's like at some point, like, you talked about like the phone, the iPhone became a communication device. You started thinking about the fact that it wasn't like, oh, there's all this stuff that we already know.
Sure.
There's something there that people are going to do. There's going to be a new mindset at some point. I mean, you think about it, how many people actually pick up their phone and talk anymore? And when you probably started talking about the phone, did you realize that was going to be?
We did call the phone. We did. When we envisioned that as part of the health team, we called it a mini Mac because the Mac was going to. Our goal was to take that Mac box that you saw in that picture and reduce it down to the size of being able to wear it on your belt, right, so that you could do everything that you could do at that point in time.
But that's what I'm getting at. You didn't start thinking about traditional ways you're doing it now.
No.
And so that's sort of like, in terms of like MyMeter, what's the step that people are going to go to say, oh, this is the way this is the way I think about power or energy in the future. Yeah. Like they don't care about utility companies and how they're making money.
Yeah, most people don't know what a kilowatt hour is. They probably don't look at their electric bill.
Right.
How are we going to engage them to actually?
What's the shift? Right now we just go and click on the light switch and do all these things.
Sure.
We never think about how power really happens and how we sort of need to be more engaged with it.
Yeah.
So what's the difference that your company is going to have to get people to start thinking differently and talking about that?
Yeah, I think some of it is helping them recognize that there are ways that they can be empowered to manage their energy use and interact with it in ways that aren't so difficult to get the insights.
Why do they want to do that? Why do they care?
Well, like I said, they
Yeah, I know.
Because if you go back to my adoption curve, we're in a big cycle right now on energy conservation, right, with early adopters and innovators.
Yeah.
And we're moving that into the next stage. And it's going to happen. Okay. Anyway, thank you all for coming today. Really appreciate it.